Great news to start off the week because we're going to be talking about extending no fishing zones within marine protected areas in a set of islands of South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, which is southeast of Argentina and South America and just a bit north of Antarctica. This is going to help protect penguins and baleen whales like humpback whales. It's really important, and we're going to talk about it on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And folks, I am back from a much needed break. I went to Italy with my family, my mom, my brother, my wife, and my kids. We had a fantastic time. It's my second time being in Italy, my kids' first time being in Europe, or my first time being in Europe. My second time being in Europe, my kid's first time being in Europe, and it was just a wonderful place to visit. We went to Rome, got all the history and all the tourist sites done, the Colosseum, the Vatican, not Pompeii, we did that in the Amalfi Coast, but we also, what else did we see? We saw the Trevi Fountain, we saw the Spanish Steps. It was just a wonderful place, such immense history. I'm a history buff as well. Learned a lot of new things, and it was just wonderful. And we had great weather the entire time. If you ever go to Italy, Rome, Amalfi Coast, I would suggest March would be a very good time to go, just because it's right before their big tourist season starts. The weather is perfect, in my opinion. It's about anywhere between 8 degrees and 17 degrees Celsius. It's wonderful. A little bit of rain sometimes, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And so I suggest anybody who has the chance to go. It's really, really great. But with that said, back to podcasting. It's been a while. I took a couple of weeks off, although I batch recorded a bunch, so you didn't get an interruption in the publication of episodes. But I'm back recording, super happy. Batch recording tonight on a Sunday as I get back, and wanted you to listen to the whole week. So tune in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for this week's episodes, and every Monday and Wednesday and Friday for future episodes. But so we're going to talk about this new extension of no fishing zones in the MPAs for South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. Now, Johnny Briggs of the Pew Charitable Trusts, there's a specific program, and it's called sorry, I had it ready before. It is called can't find it. Oh, it's called the Pew Bertarelli Ocean Legacy Partnership, which is the partnership between Pew Charitable Trust and Swiss philanthropist Donna Bertarelli. That campaign on increased protection in a lot of the UK overseas territories. I had Johnny Briggs on the podcast, who's from the Pew Charitable Trust, a number of years ago. I'll link to that episode once I find it, so that you guys can take a look. But it was a huge increase of protected areas around the UK overseas territories, which a lot of them were island nations, and they wanted to, basically protect 30% by 2030. And so there's a big push there, and they've been doing that. They've been doing that huge push, and I think it's really great to see another protection even better. Now, when we talk about marine protected areas, I want you to know that there's a definition under the UN of what a marine protected area is. And that's a fully protected area. The fully protected area means no fishing, no extraction of any sort, oil or gas, mining, or anything like that is allowed within that area. Now, with that said, there are a number of marine protected areas that have either one or more management areas within it. And so there are different focuses on each area, and that could be for a number of different reasons. A great example is I can't speak, it's my first day back. The Great Barrier Reef. Wow, this is unreal. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Protected Area is a great example of, a network of marine protected areas that have different management focuses. And I think that's what's really interesting. There's some areas that are reserved for no take, no nothing, no, it's just you cannot go in there. Not even scientists can go in there. And then there's others where scientists can go in and do some research. There's others where the divers and snorkelers and tourist activities as well. And there's some that are open to fishing and so forth. So there's a lot of different areas depending on where they are. This has a similar style where there was a marine protected area there before. It was established in 2012, and it was basically a 1.24 million square kilometer marine protected area around the islands of, like I said, South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. And it was originally established in 2012, and it banned all bottom trawling as well as bottom fishing at depths less than 700 meters, which is 2,300 feet. The government has now established no new no-take areas within the MPA that will be adopted into the SGSSI legislation, which is what we just talked about. And so this will be equivalent to the size of Wales, the country Wales within the UK. So that's really great to see. Now, to go into it, there's a new no fishing zones of over 166,000 kilometers squared of the existing MPA, and prohibited krill fishing in an additional 17,000 kilometers squared of the MPA. So a lot more that's going to be protected from fishing. So you're probably wondering, like, why did they do this? Well, there was a push by the UK government, the Blue Belt program, as well as other UK government initiatives that wanted to protect more of this coastline. Reasons being, this is an area where baleen whales as well as penguins end up feeding on krill as well as other fish that feed on krill, and they feed on other fish. So Patagonia toothfish is one of them, and one of those fish. And so, those areas are very, very important to production of those types of species, which are, you got the penguins and humpback whales as well as other baleen whales will depend on eating the krill for their nutrition. So for whales, humpback whale is, they're doing very well. They're a huge conservation success story. They've come back from, the brink of extinction. I think their population is even rebounded up to 90% of what they were pre-whaling days, which is great. However, others are not doing so well, like the fin and the blue whale are not doing as well. And experts are concerned about the present and future impacts of fishing and human-induced climate change on the species in the South Atlantic area. Here's why, especially with krill. Krill does well under, and it gets produced under ice. And so with climate change heating up the earth, heating up the seas, melting ice at rapid rates that we haven't seen in sort of human history before, that becomes a problem for the production of krill just in general, right? Just because climate change is affecting the production of krill. Add the pressure of fishing of krill, which up to 62 million metric tons of krill get fished every year. That's a lot of krill. Even though there's still a lot of krill out there, that's a lot of krill. We're starting to see the reduction in those populations of krill. And so with that reduction, we want to help as much as possible take that up. So if we can take away the direct human effect, which is fishing, and you can reduce that amount, then you can help the krill adjust to climate change naturally, which, even though it's unnatural from a climate change perspective and human induction perspective, it will help reduce those cumulative effects, right? Having more than one area or more than one effect or impact on a population will have an effect overall and will reduce it at a much more rapid rate. So being able to take that direct effect out of fishing, then you all of a sudden have this ability to adapt to one, although large, one impact on their population. That's what helps this population. That's what's going to help this population rebound. And so that's what's important. And so Johnny Briggs, what he said he had a quote in Manga Bay News where I got this article. I'll put the link in the show notes. If you can lock in and ensure that these key areas that krill-dependent species are feeding in will not be fished in the future, you're giving them the best chance possible as a climate is changing. As everything is uncertain, you're supporting the ecosystem as much as possible. So yes, we know that this is going to be a problem. We know climate change is going to be a big problem and is a big problem for a lot of these small island nations, for a lot of these species, for krill, for Patagonia toothfish, for mackerel icefish, for Antarctic toothfish. All these areas are difficult. They're very difficult to, sort of protect. And these species are very difficult to protect. So being able to give them the best chance possible against climate change, this will actually help, in the future. Now, with the krill fishing, the new protections, how will it affect? So Mongomery News has some really great guidelines on how this will affect, not guidelines, but predictions of how it's going to affect it. So the SGSSI government had to carefully consider the fisheries operating in the South Atlantic when deciding how to implement no and limited fishing areas. So the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands are located in the middle of the Antarctic krill fishing territory. Every year, industrial trawlers will make their way south to scoop up these tiny shrimp-like crustaceans. So these are people from South America that will come down and do this, because they, a lot of them, it ends up being in the area where this major krill fishing is done, or krill production is done. So the krill are then processed, and what they're used for is they're used for either fish feed for aquaculture, or as pet food or krill oil supplements. So it's, even though it's producing a lot for, human nature and for pets and so forth, our pets and so forth, it doesn't necessarily go towards a lot. It's much better in the ocean than it is in these areas. Now, with that said, the director there was one person here, Executive Director of the Association of Responsible Krill Harvesting Companies, ARC, Javier Arada, who participated in the review process for the SGSSI MPA, but was not part of the decision-making process, said that the no and limited fishing areas will slightly displace krill fishing, but will not entail significant changes to krill fishing operations. So the fact is it's going to help the species. It's going to help for krill production. It's going to help the whales. It's going to help the penguins on their feeding. And it's not going to impact the fishing industry that much for krill, which is great. Arada said, "We are content with the decision. I think there is a good balance between the need to protect some pelagic areas and also to maintain the regulated fishery, both for krill and for toothfish. The main factor behind the expansion of the MPA was to try to improve protection for whales." This is what we want in conservation. We want to have a compromise that, hey, even though we didn't get all of the protection that we wanted, and this is what was concluded in this article, people were happy with the decision. People were happy with the compromise, not only from an environment protection standpoint, but also from a fishing standpoint. It's going to slightly displace it, but it's not going to be that bad. That's really important when we're talking about conservation, is to get all parties to agree. Now, with that said, Argentina is not necessarily happy with the process, and there's a bit of controversy in who claims the sovereignty of the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands. That could be a problem in the future. The UK says it's their overseas territory. Argentina says no, it's actually ours. So there's obviously some controversy there. We're going to see how this ends up, and we'll probably follow this story. But essentially, that's it. The one other thing that we have to think about is what's going to happen with the CCAMLR, MLR, which is the governing protection around the Antarctic. And I'm going to look for I always forget the actual designation, the acronym. Here it is. It's the Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, which operates as part of the Antarctic Treaty System that allocates catch limits. Now, this is made up of about 24 different nations that decide on what happens. It has specified that the total allowable catch for krill is 5.6 million metric tons each year across the Southwest Atlantic sector, which is divided between 4 sub-areas. It has also set a so-called trigger level, or actual catch limit, of 620,000 metric tons each year, which is about 1% of the estimate biomass for this region. So, with that said, having the CCAMLR as part of this process is going to be interesting to see, because they have taken out the ability to protect or have networks of marine protected areas in other parts of Antarctica, including the Weddell Sea, Antarctic and East Antarctica, and the Weddell Sea and the Antarctic Peninsula, which would cover more than 4.5 million kilometers squared. If we can get those protected areas implemented, that would be insanely great protection. That would be insane. However, in October 2023, the members of the CCA-MLR rejected this MPA proposal for the 7th year in a row, despite having committed to creating a representative network of MPAs in 2009. With that said, the Ross Sea MPA, which is also an Antarctic MPA, took several years to get approval. It was rejected a number of years in a row, close to 7, I think, but don't quote me on that just yet. But it took a number of years before it got approved. So it got rejected a bunch of times, and then it got approved. So there's still some ability to approve it. This is just a much larger area. And usually there's 2 countries, China and Russia, who oppose and reject the proposal. And so we're going to see if they ever change their mind, which they did with the Ross Sea. So you never know. They might do this with this network of marine protected areas, East Antarctica, Weddell Sea, and the Antarctic Peninsula. So hopefully we will see that happen at some point and sometime. All the other countries are in, except for maybe a couple more that are influenced by China and Russia. But I have a positive feeling that this is going to happen. Regardless of what happens, this is going to be huge for the fact that we're increasing the no fish take area, no take fish area, as well as an additional 17,000 kilometers squared for the no krill fishing area, is going to be really important for this area because it's where its location is in terms of production of krill, and that's going to be big. This is all going to be huge. I'm really happy to be announcing this. I'm really happy to be telling you about this because we need more positive, optimistic ocean conservation stories, and this is one of them. Even though it's a small island state, it has big ramifications for whales and penguins in the area. Like I mentioned it before, when we talk about marine protected areas, you have to protect, especially when you're talking about species who travel so much, especially with baleen whales who have such large migration ranges. It's very important to protect these vital feeding areas because this is an aggregation area. If you protect these whales, you also protect the other fish and the other species that come in around this area to feed on krill, right? And penguins and seabirds and so forth. This is going to be really important, and I think this is just an example of what this is going to happen. I'm looking forward to seeing what this can do in the future, not only to protect humpback whales, but other baleen whales like the fin and the blue whale, which are not doing as well. But that's it for today's episode. I would love to hear your opinion. You can hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. Let me know what you think of this episode. And of course, with everything, it really helps if you share this. You know, people who are worried about ocean conservation, worried about climate change, you can tell them that, hey, you know what? There are people out there that are really working to help. And here's an example of that story, of one of those stories. I think this is really important to share, to give people that that optimism that the ocean is going to be okay, even with climate change rearing its ugly head. And it's important that we reduce climate change, but it's also important that we understand that there are people out there protecting species from all different levels of the food web in the ocean from climate change by allowing us to reduce the cumulative effects, especially of fishing, on specific species that support other ecosystems and species. So, share that around. You can just go to your app, your favorite podcast app that you listen to this podcast on, and then you can just click the copy button and just send it to people. Send it to people that you've had that conversation with. If you haven't had the conversation with them, have that conversation with them about ocean, because it helps get over sort of climate, ocean conservation, anxiousness. That's what I did in that last episode that I produced. So check that episode out, but also share this episode and other episodes that have optimism in it, although we can't do it all the time, but that's okay. But share that episode. It really helps grow the podcast as well as keep people informed. And speaking of keeping informed, if you want to stay informed, hit me up at speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And you can stay in touch 5 days a week with all other ocean stories that I can't cover on here or the YouTube channel. And that's about it. So thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.